So welcome to the Beef Cattle Research Council's webinar on how to improve weaning weights, conception rates, and calf health. My name is Stacey Domlewski. I'm the Extension Assistant for the Beef Cattle Research Council, and I'll be your moderator tonight. So this session will last for approximately an hour, but may go longer depending on the questions that you have during the question and answer period. If you're on Twitter, please feel free to tweet along with us using #BeefWebinar. We are recording this session, and I'll email out a link to the recording to everyone that's registered within the next couple of days. So if you missed hearing anything tonight and want to go back and watch it later, you can. I would also encourage you to take some notes as well, as this might help you to remember more of what you learned tonight. Of course, throughout the webinar, you're going to be able to hear and see tonight's presenters, but we can't hear or see you. So if you'd like to communicate with us, please just type into the small chat window in the control panel on the side of your screen. And if you have a question or comment for me or either of our presenters, that's where we'll be able to do it. So feel free to send in questions at any time and we'll answer them at the end of the hour. If your internet connection is a bit slow tonight, it might help to close the webcam window. This means you won't be able to see us, but it would hopefully make the audio come through a little more clearly and get the slides to load a little bit faster for you. All right, so let's get started. So here's what we're going to be covering for tonight. So first you'll hear from Naomi on how body condition scoring affects weaning weights, conception rates, and calf health, among other things. Then we will hear from Karin about what to do with this information now that we have it. And we'll follow it up with Mike Neilson to talk about how he uses body condition scoring on his operation. We'll then open it up to questions from you and finish the webinar by letting you know where you can find more information that may be of interest to you that you can use on your farm or ranch. So with that, I am pleased to introduce our first speaker of the evening, Naomi Paley. Naomi is the regional livestock specialist with the Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture. She works with producers and industries on all aspects of production, nutrition, and management. She's also involved with initiatives in the areas of herd genetics and improvement, low-cost management practices, and environmental farm planning. So with that, there we go.
Thanks, Stacey. All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm pleased to be here with you this evening, talking to you about beef body condition scoring and basically giving you the how and the why of body condition scoring. I am Naomi Paley. I'm a regional livestock specialist with the Ministry of Agriculture here in Yorkton, Saskatchewan. Okay, so just to get started, a little bit of information for you about body condition scoring. What is it? Essentially, it is a hands-on measure of the amount of body fat that a cow is carrying. In Canada here, we use a body condition scoring system of 1 to 5. And essentially, in this system, 1 is on the low end where it's thin, very underconditioned. 5 is the opposite end of the scale where a cow is fat or overconditioned. So ideally, we're really looking to try and manage our cows at a body condition score right in the middle, about a 2.5 to 3 on a fairly year-round basis, and try to be consistent with that as we possibly can. When we talk about body condition scoring, I mentioned it's a hands-on type of measurement. It's not something that you can really do by eyeballing. You can get a look at it and you can get a feel for what it might look like, but you really need to get a baseline and understand how things are and what kind of condition a cow is carrying. You really need to get your hands on her. And so there are a number of different places that we can use as reference points when we talk about body condition scoring on the cow. And so in most cases, these are places where there is no muscle or very little muscle between the bone and the hide. And so any padding that we feel in those particular areas is going to be fat cover or body condition. And so typically we look at these reference points along the backbone, the hip bones, the short ribs, and we'll have a better picture of that in a minute. The hook and the pin bones, the tail head, all around the pelvis area, those are typically places where cows will carry their fat and carry their body condition. And so sometimes you'll need to check a few of those places to get a good idea of what the body condition is like. So this is just a little cross-section picture here on the right-hand side looking at those short ribs. And the short ribs, the technical term for them are transverse processes. They're the little short ribs that stick out directly transversely from the spine. They are located near the hind end of the cow, right between her pelvis and where her long ribs start and descend down from her spine. And so the best place and the first place to check for body condition is right there on those short ribs. So all it takes is your hand coming in there, just as the picture shows it, and using your thumb to push on the end of those short ribs to feel for fat cover in there. So in an ideal situation, we want to be checking the short ribs first, the spine, the hook and the pin bones, the 2 points on the pelvis of the cow, and then on either side of the tail head, and sort of giving a quick feel in there for how much fat cover the cow is actually carrying at that particular time. For that optimum condition of 2.5 to 3 that we're really targeting to try and maintain our cows in, what will that feel like? Essentially, you're going to be able to feel those short ribs with some pressure with your thumb, but they shouldn't feel sharp to the touch, and you should be able to actually feel them there. If you can't feel them at all, the cow is more than likely over-conditioned, and if they're quite sharp to the touch, she's probably under-conditioned. There's a lot of detail here that gives you the actual sort of what it feels like as you go through the different scores from 1 to 5. Again, that body condition score 2.5 to 3 that we're targeting. So you should be able to feel those short ribs with some pressure, and there should be some noticeable fat on the tail head or on either side of the tail head there. When you start body condition scoring, if it's something you haven't done before, it's not really important to try and you know, get it down to a science and say, oh, she's a 2.6 or a 3.8 or something like that. It's not really important to try and put an actual number to it. You just need to know what you're aiming for in the middle of the board there, and be able to divide them into at least 3 groups. So be able to know if she's about right, if she's over-conditioned, or if she's under-conditioned. And that should get you away to the races in terms of being able to use body condition scoring as a management tool and build it into your management system from there. So, as I mentioned, body condition scoring is not a visual thing, it's a hands-on thing, but on the far end of the spectrum, you can see it visually. So, this obviously is a cow that is very under-conditioned. She would be a 2 or less. She is thin. This is ideally what we're looking for, a 2.5 to a 3, so you can tell she's nice and smooth over her top side. There isn't any sharp protrusions of hip bones or rib bones or a backbone or anything. She's got a nice, smooth, even cover on her. So she's about right where we'd really be targeting. This obviously would be the cow that would be over-conditioned. She's a 4 or more, and she's too fat. So you can see she's very rounded out in all of her reference areas that we talked about across the top and even across her shoulder, and then over the back end there too. She's just kind of looks like an overinflated balloon. She's just over-conditioned. She's got too much on her, and that's not healthy either. So when we talk about using body condition scoring and a management system, in a perfect world, we'd like to try and do it at least three times a year, but I tell guys, you know, if you can at least get your hands on them once or even twice during the year at certain times, that's a benefit, and you're going to be able to use that information to help you be a better manager. So in an ideal situation, if we can, in the fall time is a good time when you're processing them or running them through the chutes, weaning calves, things like that. So in the fall, we really want to have those cows in good shape. Our optimum goal there for a body condition score is a 3. At calving, the optimum score for those mature cows in your herd is a 2.5, and for those first calf heifers, because they need to continue to grow and build their own body and body reserves at the same time that they're producing that very first calf, we want to have their score a little higher at about 3. If you do happen to do it before breeding, which is a pretty critical time in terms of body condition and the cow's nutritional status, 30 days or a month before breeding would be another time that you might take a look at body condition scoring, and optimally there we want to try and have at least a 2.5 for a body condition score. So just a little fact here that it's more expensive to put weight on a cow during the winter than it is to maintain her in good condition, and that's not rocket science. I think that's pretty basic when we think about it from a common sense point of view. So obviously our feed costs are going to be higher on that cow if we're trying to put condition on her during the winter, but it's also biologically expensive, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a minute, about how that's biologically expensive for the cow and for your whole management system. So when we look at the feed costs, an average cow, an average body size cow, 1,300, 1,350 pounds, is going to need about 2 pounds of fat or body weight to gain 1 full condition score. So if you equate that to real life and real barley and real hay and dollars and cents, you'd need about 25 bushels of barley in addition to her regular maintenance diet to put that 1 full body condition score on that 200 pounds. So 25 bushels of barley at $3.27, which is close to our local price here recently. It's going to cost you $81.75 a head per cow in addition to her regular maintenance diet. On the hay side of things, if you were going to do that with a good quality hay, it'd be about 2,000 pounds of hay at about 5 cents a pound. You're looking at $100 per cow. So there's definitely and obviously a feed cost associated with trying to put body condition back onto a cow and get her caught back up to where she needs to be to have a healthy calf and to rebreed in a timely manner. We're just going to use a little bit of a scenario as we go through some of the remaining slides here, just to be able to put some numbers to things and to make it kind of seem more like a real life applicable situation. So I've got my guy here is Rancher X. He's got a 100 cow herd, and his cows are coming into winter in less than ideal conditions. So pastures weren't in that great a shape at the end of the season, and so they ended up losing some conditions. So they're kind of behind the 8 ball. Their winter hair coat is deceiving, and he's not using body condition scoring as a management tool. So he's just kind of eyeballing them and thinks that they look all right to him. So what could possibly happen in a situation like this? Okay, so I mentioned biological costs a little while ago there. So taking a look at how that body condition of your cows at the time of calving affects how quickly they're going to come back into heat and cycle again after calving. So we've got the 3 different groups of cows here. We've got thin, moderate, and good. And good is where we're aiming that 2.5 to a 3. And the research actually took a look at cows 40, 60, and 90 days after calving, post-calving, and looked at the percentage of those cows that were actually showing heat. And so on the one end of the spectrum here, cows in thin condition, less than ideal, 90 days after calving, so 3 months post-calving, just a little over half of those cows, 66% of them, were actually cycling and showing heat. You go to the other end of the spectrum there, cows in good condition, that 2.5 to a 3. At 60 days post-calving, 2 months after calving, 91% of them were showing heat and cycling. 90 days post-calving, 100% of them were showing heat. So you can see the drastic difference there between body condition scores and the relationship that has in terms of having your cows cycling and being rebred in a timely manner. And we're going to look at some numbers here in a little bit that shows you how important that is and how it hits your pocketbook directly when your cows aren't rebreeding on time and getting bred early in your breeding season. Another one of the factors that kind of plays into the biological costs when you look at body condition, there are some that believe that burning body condition or burning some back fat off of the cow is a good way to try and make use of extra reserves that the cow has, and you can sort of bank on that. But there are some biological costs associated with that. This graph here just basically shows two different scenarios. So on the left-hand side, the blue bar shows the amount of energy that is gained, that the cow will receive or that is released when she burns 1 unit of body condition. So she's receiving, about 900, I think it's megacalories here, of body condition or of energy when she burns 1 unit of body condition. However, if we are to try and put that body condition back on her, it takes us probably just about 1,900 units of megacalories of energy to put that 1 unit of body condition back on. So there's over a 50% loss in efficiency when you look at the energy that's released and the energy required to put 1 unit of body condition onto a cow. So you can see it's a really inefficient system, and it's going to end up costing you in the end, one way or another, if you're counting on sort of farming the fat off the back of your cow. So when cows are losing weight, there's a lot of different things happening. There's a lot of signals that are going on to the cow, and basically for Mother Nature telling her that she doesn't have enough energy, she's losing weight, and so there's lots of different things happening. So first of all, the quality of the colostrum is going to be compromised when she's losing weight, and ultimately calf immunity is not going to be where it should be because that colostrum wasn't as good as it should have been. Her total milk production is going to be decreased, and that's going to affect in the end of the day, the calf weaning size. The calves just aren't going to have as good a start as they should have had and weren't fed as well as they should have been. And when cow weight is decreasing, conception rates decrease. So there's a lot of arrows pointing down here, and so when cow weight goes down, a lot of other things tend to go in that direction as well. So the real cost of missed cycles, we alluded to this earlier about cows not cycling early and getting rebred early. Contrary to some management systems, the goal is not just to get your cows bred. We want to get them bred early. Just because, when you're preg checking, she got caught at, probably like the end of August or something like that, that's probably not a good sign, in terms of that she didn't get bred real early in your breeding season. So we want to try and set our goals a little bit higher than that. Every time a cow misses a cycle and doesn't get bred on the cycle, she remains open. So the calf is about 20 days younger. So a cycle is 21 days, so the calf's 20 days younger. And if your calves usually gain about 2 pounds a day, so the calf's going to be 40 pounds lighter. At 2 1/4 a pound, which is close to where we are in the market right now, you can count on a $90 per head loss every time a cow skips a cycle and doesn't get bred. You're losing $90 a head on a calf. So that's pretty significant, and so that's why it's important to make sure a good portion of your cows breed early. This is something that basically it's a calving interval and distribution. So essentially, your calving interval is just the time from when the first calf is born until your last calf is born. It's your calving season. And the distribution is essentially looking at the number of calves that are born in each of those 21-day cycles throughout your calving season. And this is exactly what I was just talking about having those cows born early, and having the calves born early, and having the majority of them born within the first 2 cycles. So ideally, in an ideal situation, we'd like to have at least 60% of the calves born in that first 21-day cycle, and then about the remainder born within the second and third cycles. So this does a couple of things. Obviously, earlier born calves are going to be heavier and have a better weaning weight, and it also creates a group of calves that is fairly uniform. So when it comes time to either placing them in a feedlot or selling them at the market, when you've got a nice uniform group of calves to feed or to sell, there's lots of benefits that go along with that. Price and ease of management and everything else that goes with that. So getting back to our Rancher X scenario here, so even if half of his cows in his 100 cow herd didn't conceive on that first cycle, he'd be losing 40 pounds a calf on 50 calves in his herd. Multiplying that out, it's 2,000 pounds of lost weaning weight. At $2.50 a pound, $5,000 in revenue loss, just because half of his cows didn't conceive or didn't get bred in that first cycle. So not only does body condition affect what's going on with this year's calf crop, it also has an effect on what's going on for next year as well. So important to consider that. So the effect of body condition on next year's weaning weights. This little chart here just takes a look and shows you how the cow condition at calving will affect your overall profitability and weaning weight in the following year. So in our first line here, we've got cows at a body condition of 2 at calving, which is suboptimal. We want to have them at least 2.5. So if they're at a 2, and then after calving management, they lose more weight. So they hit lactation, and the energy and protein requirements are like through the roof. They're increased by at least half. You could expect to have a loss in next year's calf weaning weight of up to 70%. And that's taking into account open cows in the herd as well. So not just calf weight off the top, but it's also taking into account open cows in your herd. Second scenario there, so cows at a body condition of 2 at calving, and you just maintain them. So you don't let them lose any more weight, but you maintain them. You could still expect to see up to a 40% loss in weaning weights the next year. Third scenario, you realized that she was, not in proper condition, and so she gained a little bit of condition after calving. You'd reduce the losses, but you still can have up to a 15% loss in next year's calf crop and weaning weights. So you can see if you get behind the 8 ball, it's going to take some really hard work, and there's some big costs associated with that when it comes to trying to get yourself back on track when it comes to body condition. Okay, so calves born in the spring of 2016. Back to our scenario here. So calves from cows with a body condition score of 2 at calving, or from those cows that lose condition after calving, you could expect to see anywhere from a 5 to a 25% reduction in weaning weights. And this is largely due to the reduced amount of nutritional value in the cow's milk and the amount of nutrition that calf is receiving during the nursing period. So if we put that into some dollars and cents for these cows that were less than optimal at calving and then lose condition after calving, so if these are 500-pound calves at weaning, that 5 to 25% loss in weaning weight, so that would equate to anywhere from 25 to 125 pounds per calf at 2.5 per pound. You could be looking at a loss of anywhere from $62.50 to $312.50 per calf. In lost revenue due to weaning weight. So on 100 calves, you're looking at a loss of $6,200 all the way up to $31,000, and that's just money that you could have had if you maintain proper body condition score. So where will the energy come from? If you know that cows have lost body condition and you need to get it back from somewhere, where does it come from? And so a lot of guys think, they had a hard winter, my feed wasn't as good as quality as it should have been, and when they hit pasture, that fresh pasture is going to compensate. And it can, That does happen, but there's a couple of things you need to consider there. So first of all is, will it be in time to stimulate cycling? Will the pasture quality be good enough and soon enough to get them back on an inclining plane of nutrition and back to a proper body condition so that they're going to be cycling by the time breeding season rolls around? The other thing you need to ask yourself is that pasture free? And in most cases, it's not. There are some definite costs associated with that. And what you need to ask yourself, what is the effect of continually withdrawing from your pasture bank account? Your pasture is a really valuable resource to you, and if you continually count on it to try and supply extra energy and extra nutrition to put body condition back onto your cows that they lost over the winter feeding period, there will be an effect, and there is a cost of that as well. So just something that you have to keep in mind and have to consider when it comes to managing body condition. Okay, I think that wraps up my portion of the presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Naomi. There was lots of great information on that presentation. So we just have a few poll questions to follow up with Naomi's presentation. So the questions will be show up on your screen, and if you can click your answers will not be shown to the audience. Here we'll just show the overall averages. We won't show your individual answers, if that makes any sense, so they're anonymous. So the first question we have is, do you record and calculate calving distribution in your cow herd? So the number of cows born in each 21-day cycle. So yes or no? All right, so it looks like the results came in. About 74% of you did record calving distribution, and 26% did not. So another question with Naomi's presentation. So as a production goal, what percentage of the cow herd should you see calving within the first 60 days of the calving season? What are your opinions on this? Okay, so about 70% of you thought that it should be around 75%, and the other 60% thought about 25%. Or sorry, 25% of you thought it should be around 60%. And then 0 for both 40 and 50%. All right, so now we're going to move on. We'll hear from Karin Schmid. Karin is the beef production specialist with Alberta Beef Producers. She grew up on a mixed farm near Calgary, Alberta, and where she raised purebred Simmental cattle and grain, and is still involved to a limited extent. In her role with Alberta Beef Producers, Karin provides technical support in the areas of production, health, welfare, and research. So with that, Karin? Oh, just a second, Karin. Your microphone isn't on.
Okay, I think I've got that figured out. Sorry.
Fantastic. No problem.
Thanks, Stacy. We just heard Naomi talk about why it's important to monitor body condition score and the dollars you could be leaving on the table with that. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're actually going to do with the information that we can get from body condition scoring. And before we get too far into the presentation, I'm going to get Stacy to do my first poll question, because it will really help me put context around how many people will get value out of this information.
All right, so our first question, do you regularly perform and record the results of hands-on body condition scoring on your breeding females? So yes or no? All right, so it looks like about 24% said yes and 76% said no.
Okay, those results track fairly closely with the Western Canadian cow-calf survey that found that 19% regularly body condition score cows with the hands-on method. So before we get too far into what we can do with the information that comes from body condition scoring, we need to understand energy requirements. And this basically means we need to match our resources with the cow's nutritional needs. And this picture is adapted from something out of New Mexico State University, and it basically just shows you how relative energy requirements change throughout the production season. So we can see if we're calving around mid-March, we get a real peak in energy requirements after calving when they reach that peak lactation, and then it drops off back in the fall. And Naomi's talked about, you know, the best time to body condition score, and ideally we'd like to do it 3 times a year, but at the very least we should be doing it in the fall before we head into that winter season and when condition becomes very expensive to add. Basically, your last chance to add condition, we will talk about that, but we're looking at about 60 days prior to calving is basically your last chance to really add some condition to those cows before it just gets too energetically and expensive in terms of dollars. So as we saw from the picture, our energy requirements are highest in late gestation and lactation, and those actually are 20.
Just a second here, Karin. Can't hear you again.
Feedstuffs and what is available to you in your area. With our first calf heifers, we have to be a little bit careful because they're still growing and they need to be managed differently from cows. We need to provide extra feed to the heifers that they need without overfeeding the mature cows. And we also the competition or bullying from those older cows. And really, we can see big differences in the energy requirements of these growing heifers versus the mature cows. This graph shows TDN, net energy for maintenance, net energy for gain, and crude protein. Both of these animals are at a body condition score of 3, but we can see in the 3rd trimester that the bred heifer requires almost 3 pounds per day more TDN and 0.3 more pounds of crude protein per day than the mature cow, just maintaining her weight. So when we're talking about under-conditioned cows, we want to put condition on when the energy requirements are the lowest, and this is after the calf is weaned. This provides a bit of an insurance policy heading into the winter, and I'll talk a little bit more about winter feeding for under-conditioned cows in a few slides. With over-conditioned cows, they do have some body reserves that they can use to make up some of the difference for what they might need. But we have to be careful with this strategy. As Naomi showed, there are some downsides as the cows are continually dropping in weight. So we really want to make sure that we don't drop them below a condition score of 2.5. And we want to make sure that the drop happens gradually, and not sharply. And there's a trick with an increasing versus decreasing plane of nutrition, especially prior to calving and breeding. So both a drastic drop in body condition can have long-lasting impacts on fertility, but lots of researchers have reported an effect of plan of nutrition on return to estrus and the ability to conceive. So basically, we don't want the cows, even if they were over-conditioned, to be dropping down on their plane of nutrition heading into calving or the breeding season. We want them to be at least on a maintenance level and, if possible, on an increasing plane of nutrition. And you may have heard this referred to as flushing prior to breeding, and that just means flushing with nutrients prior to breeding. So if you are going to try and drop some condition on those fat cows, just be really, really careful and thoughtful about how you do it. What we want to do, I think, is pull up another poll, Stacy. Those next two questions.
Okay. So our next question here is, do you typically sort your breeding females for winter feeding? Yes or no? So results for that one, about 62% said yes, they did, and 38% no, they didn't. So our next question, for those of you who said yes, so how did you sort them? So by age, so for example, first calvers versus mature cows, by stage of pregnancy, so for example, with those, the ones that are due to calve or have calved, and or by condition, so either main herd, thin cows, or did you use some other method? All right. So it looks like most of you that voted said that you sorted them by age. 7% said by stage of pregnancy, and 54% by condition.
Again, I'm really heartened by those results, as they're tracking really, really closely with the Western Canadian Cow-Calf survey, which found that 56%, so a little bit lower, of respondents sorted for winter feeding. And out of those who did sort, 83% were sorting by age, 26% were sorting by a stage of pregnancy, and 66% were sorting by body condition. So it seems like the responses out of the Western Canadian Cow-Calf survey are holding up very well with our little mini polls here. When we're talking about sorting animals into management groups for winter feeding, we typically think about 3 groups. And those 3 groups are mature cows in good condition, replacement bred heifers and second calvers, and thin and old cows. So the mature cows will do just fine on average quality forage or in extended grazing system. There's not much to worry about there. The heifers will need good quality forage and may require some supplementation depending on how fast they're growing and how cold the winter is. And the thin and old cows will really need good quality forage and will definitely need some supplementation to get through in good condition. You're going to hear me talk. I'm going to say these 2 words a lot in the next few slides. Feed test. Underfeeding impacts reproduction. Overfeeding is wasteful and costly. And cows at different stages of production have different requirements. And the only way you can manage your feed resources properly is to know what nutritional value those feedstuffs have. So feed testing is super important. We want to start managing thin cows as early as possible. 100 days, if calving is 100 days away and you need a half score or 1 score improvement in body condition, there's probably enough time to do that at a minimal cost. Basically, adjustments to feeding programs should probably happen no later than 60 days before calving, but depending on how much condition you need to put on, it likely will be more expensive. And if you try to shrink that window even further, it will become even more expensive. So a cow on a body condition score of 2 versus a cow on a body condition score of 3, about the same size, will require an extra 1,200 pounds of hay to get through the winter. And that's not cheap, especially this year in Alberta. Generally, when we're talking about under-conditioned cows, we want to stay away from really poor quality forage or straw, simply because they will eat lots of it, and that can really increase the potential for impaction. So cows are easiest to manage if they're fed in those separate management groups, and we understand that sometimes your production system may not allow for, you know, the 3 separate groups, but at least try to keep your better conditioned cows away from your thinner cows. Energy is generally the most limiting nutrient, but protein can also be a concern, especially in late gestation. In 2013, there was a forage quality survey done in Saskatchewan, and what they found was that at minus 25 degrees Celsius in the winter, only 38% of the forages would meet the energy requirements of the cows in the last trimester, and only 5% of those forages met the energy requirements in the last month of pregnancy. So, again, forage quality really varies from year to year and even in the same field, and this can be up to 25 to 30% year to year or area to field. So feed test. Your extension specialist or feed testing lab can walk you through the procedures, and there's also a really good BCRC video on the process. NIR is cheaper and faster, but is also less accurate for mineral content, which, depending on the types of feed you're feeding, may be an issue for you. Quality declines in the forages as they're exposed to the elements as well, so you may need to take a few samples throughout the winter. And really, once you've got that feed testing information, you really do need to balance the rations. You can't just take the feed testing sheet and say, oh, well, things look good, and kind of toss it in a pile. We need to have those rations balanced. So you can use ration balancing software or talk to a nutritionist to get that done. When we're talking about supplemental feed, if we're trying to put on a body condition score, a rule of thumb is about 7 pounds of barley or 11 pounds of good quality hay, and this is per day over the amount the cow requires for maintenance. In cold weather, we have to increase that even further to add an extra pound of grain or pellets, and we try to increase the grain slowly and with consistent availability to reduce the risk of rumen upset. We also need to increase the supplementation if the weather is windy or wet, because that really reduces the cow's ability to thermoregulate themselves. When we're talking about supplements, we don't want to forget about salt. We prefer a fortified trace mineral salt. This can be offered free choice. And mineral is also very important. So rule of thumb is about a 1-to-1 calcium phosphorus if we're feeding a legume or mixed grass legume hay. We want to look at a 2-to-1 calcium phosphorus plus 2 to 3% magnesium if we're feeding green feed, cereal silage, or a grain straw mix, and this is to offset some of the calcium magnesium deficiencies that we can sometimes get in those feeds, and that can really lead to conditions like winter tetany. Mixing mineral with feed can help to ensure consistent intake, but free choice works as well. Vitamins are important, specifically A, D, and E. After forages are harvested, the vitamin precursors actually oxidize and aren't available to the animal, so these vitamins need to be provided at 100% of the cow's requirements. And fresh, clean water. This can also be snow as long as there's enough snow and it's clean and not crusted over. But we want cows in early lactation or cows that are under condition to have an alternate water source. And I really like this picture from Saskatchewan agriculture of these cows out in the winter. It's a fantastic picture. And so if we look at an example ration for a mature 1,300-pound cow at body condition score 1.5, in mid to late gestation, she's gaining 2.5 pounds per day in the winter. We're really trying to put condition on her in this case. We're looking at 22 pounds grass hay, 5 pounds oat or barley straw, 4 pounds barley grain, and the appropriate minerals and vitamins. And this is quite a bit more in terms of supplementation than she might need if she was already at a body condition score of 3 and just maintaining her weight. There's a really great resource on bodyconditionscoring.ca. It's a feed cost calculator, and it is just to be used as an example for demonstration purposes. To get a really good idea of what your cows need, you need to get your feed tested and consult with ration balancing software or nutritionist, so that's my disclaimer. But you can, the scenario is to increase body condition score from a 2 to a 3 in a 1,400-pound cow in mid-gestation in thermoneutral weather. So it's not really cold, it's not really warm. You can pick your feeding period, and then you can pick from a few different feedstuffs and go to enter the costs, and then you can get an approximation of what that might cost to improve the condition on that cow. And then we can also compare it to the extra value of a weaned calf crop from cows at different body condition scores. So a few take-home messages for the audience tonight. Feed test. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. We want to match our available feedstuffs to cow requirements, manage cows separately if at all possible, start early, account for cold weather and extended grazing systems, and don't forget about your minerals and vitamins. And with that, I think I'll turn it back to Stacy.
All right. Thank you very much, Karin. So if anybody has any questions for Karin or Naomi, feel free to type them into the chat box on the side of your screen, and we will answer them at the end of the webinar tonight. So I now have the pleasure of introducing Mike Neilson. Mike, along with his wife Joanne, own and operate Neilson Cattle Company, a purebred Charolais operation selling 2-year-old bulls, along with a commercial herd and feedlot in Willowbrook, Saskatchewan, where they utilize the practice of body condition scoring on their operation. So he's going to talk to you a little bit about why they do. All right, there you go.
Good evening, everyone. It was great to hear the previous presentations, and I would like to finish off the evening with a little bit of a presentation about what we do at our cattle operation. As was mentioned in the intro, we have 120 purebred Charolais cows and about 40 commercial cows that we calve also. We have a spring calving season, and our main product on the farm is actually geared towards selling 2-year-old Charolais bulls, and we emphasize the fact that they're raised carefully on a high roughage ration and growing out to maturity. We raise a bull that's leaner and more athletic, with probably less body condition on than would be typical in the industry, but they last really well for our customers. Why do we use body condition scoring? Well, part of being profitable in the cattle industry is maintaining a cow herd that has cows in it that you can use year after year and they raise a good calf for you. So I think by the information you've already heard, you understand that with proper nutrition and management, these cows will stay in the herd for a long period of time. One thing that's not mentioned quite so often is the importance of body condition scoring on the herd bull or the bull battery that we use in our breeding programs. It's very important that especially the young bulls that we bring into our breeding programs are managed properly so that our huge investment in these cattle lasts in the operation to help us out in the future. Like, one of the challenges is to keep the yearling bulls in your breeding program as 2, 3, 4, and hopefully up to 5, 6 years of age. At our cattle operation, we also have to be very aware of the fact that our sale bulls are a big part of our business, and we put a lot of emphasis on how these cattle are raised. We continually monitor the fact of the feed that goes into them and how they're changing, and it's probably the most difficult group to manage because when you change the nutrition on the herd bull or on the sale bull ration, has to be done very carefully, otherwise there's a risk of mismanaging the intake of nutrients, and this can actually harm the longevity of the bulls for the customer. We also use body condition scoring to monitor where we've come from with the operation. So some of the results we get on a day-to-day basis will be a result of things we've done in the past. So you kind of have to learn from your mistakes in some respects, but also if there's success, see what worked out for you the previous year. On the bottom of this slide is a picture of some cows, and we do have some of the commercial cows in that picture at the Tuna Community Pasture, and that was taken this summer. I spoke from the previous slide about how we use body condition scoring, but on the herd bulls, this is one of the mature herd bulls at our operation this summer, and it's so important that these bulls carry conditions so that they go through the breeding program and they don't have a nutritional deficit to the point where it's going to affect their breeding or their ability to have energy to breed the cow herd that you put them with. How do we keep track of the body condition of these cattle? Well, the practical part of it is that you actually have to have them in a chute to get your hands on them. I mean, exceptions to this may be cases where 4-H kids, for example, will be able to handle their cattle or show cattle, but other than that, as a producer or a rancher, if you have cattle in your operation, essentially you have to do it at a time when those animals are in a chute. And I think it's important at that time to use a reference of either your vet or another specialist so that you're on the same page as far as understanding what the real body condition score is. Naomi spoke about the different body condition score and how the cattle felt like when you handled them. But in your own mind, it's always good to double check this with a specialist if they're in the area or if they're at the operation for preg checking or ration balancing or whatever. Okay, I just want to go through the seasons here and what we do with each season and our cow herd. Typically in the fall, we pull the bulls in September, and at that time we can start commingling the breeding groups. And because one of the challenges we have is since we run single sires with each breeding group because of the purebred operation, we do get into situations which, from different pastures, sometimes the cattle are mismatched from a point of view of body condition. But because they would normally go on the stockpile grazing in the fall period, this would sort itself out over the 60 days or so they're on stockpile grazing prior to weaning, and hopefully some of that evens itself out before winter. It's November 24th right now, and right about now is when we would normally be preg checking and putting cattle into management groups. The first calf heifers are usually weaned 30 days prior to, at least 30 days prior to the main cow herd. And at that time we put the first calf heifers with our bred heifers as a management group. When we preg check the cows, then we'll also sort off some thin cows from what we would call the mature group, and some of the old cows, and they would also go with these young cows. So in the winter feeding groups, we would have mature cows, then we would have first calf heifers, bred heifers, and some old thin cows. At the same time, and this has already been done, we do the feed testing as we pull the bales into the bale yards for the winter, and then we can start preparing for doing a ration balancing and figuring out the winter feeding program from that. On the back of this slide, you'll see that some of these bulls are yearling bulls in the fall season, like on pasture. And this is from our last year's sale group. These bulls would have been sold last spring. The winter season is a season where we've already done the planning and matched the cows up for feed. And although we don't have a whole lot of changes as we go along, typically we do continue with the ration that we have balanced and change it slightly as the cows move into the next stage or as they get closer to calving. One thing that we also do in the winter is sometimes cows just don't perform in the group that they're with for whatever reason. They don't compete. Perhaps they had some other issue due to health or lameness or whatever. Those would be unusual, but we try and pull those, and there'd be very few cows, pull them out and take them off and put them with either another group or bring them into the yard just so we can look after them better. In the winter, the feeding program for the bulls is a TMR program, and we do target a 3 to 3.5 body condition score on the sale bulls for the March sale. The one thing on all breeding soundness evaluations that are completed by your veterinarians, there is a spot on there for the body condition score to be mentioned, and I think it's sort of important that you refer to that on the bulls you buy just as a reference point so you have some idea how those bulls may actually work out for you in your breeding season, or if they have enough condition or perhaps even over condition. The spring season is actually the calving season, but at the same time we're preparing for the breeding season as we go through calving season, and how successful the calving season is also an indication of your winter feeding program. So if you have the goal of your first cycle is good, that's an indication of your previous year's nutrition or pasture management program. At the same time, I mean, on your operation, you'll be observing heat in the heifer pen, and this is a kind of daily indication of how successful your nutrition was in the heifer pen, because these heifers should be cycling as they reach maturity, and their body condition score will be part of this so that it gives you a good indication if they're ready for the breeding program. Well, the only other time you get to handle the cows actually is when you put them through the chute and vaccinate them for the pasture, and this is another time to just, and you perhaps don't have to do every cow, but do like a percentage of the cows, 25 or 30% of them, just to give you an idea of how they are and what you could expect going into the breeding season. On the herd bulls, once again, you're doing semen tests in the spring, and it depends how much ahead of the breeding season you do this, but it does give you some indication of where that bull's at, and it may give you time, even if you do far enough ahead, to adjust the feeding program before breeding season. In our case, because we don't start breeding until July, actually these bulls are on grass for 60 days prior to breeding, so they're in really good condition. They have a chance to walk, and the good pasture conditions usually have them in good shape for breeding. In the summer, because we have our herd in small management groups, because single sires with each group for the purebred operation, it does become a bit of a challenge if we don't match the pastures correctly with the amount of cows that are in it. A lot of our pastures in the summer are rented pasture, and we don't have a chance to have a very intensive rotational grazing program. We do monitor them over the summer, and at times we do get in situations where we see a herd maybe losing condition if we had put too many cows in a certain rented pasture, or they just happen to be on, for example, a gravelly pasture that in a dry summer, but hopefully this can be corrected in the fall when they're brought home. In summary, I think it's very important to use body condition scoring in your management. It's an objective way to do something that most people do anyway. The visual scoring of cattle is important, and everyone does it, but body condition scoring does let you monitor it objectively, and it's also a reference to use, like with the people you have on your team that help you with your cattle operations, such as your vet and your beef specialist or nutritionist. As was previously mentioned, always use feed testing and ration balancing. I want to emphasize the fact that if you do these things, don't panic and make drastic changes as you change your ration. Like, don't, for example, get your feed test and do the ration, and then all of a sudden you realize you need another 10, 12 pounds of barley or something in the ration. Make those changes very slowly, especially on the herd bull battery. It's also important on the cows to change things slowly so that you don't challenge those cattle from another point of view. And don't expect to keep every cow in the herd just because you've done all these steps. Like, some cows just don't match your management style or your conditions where you live, and it's probably good and more economical to have a certain percentage culled because some cows don't match that situation than to try and save every cow. In closing, I guess I'd just like to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here this evening, and thank Naomi for the help she's given me with my presentation tonight.
All right, thank you very much. It was great to hear what you guys do on your operation. So now we are going to open it up for questions. So again, if you have any questions, you can type them into the question box on the side of your screen. If your control panel has closed, you should see an orange arrow near the top. So just click on that arrow and it'll expand it again, and you should be able to use the chat box to type your questions. So your questions here are anonymous. You send them in and I will read them out to either Naomi, Karin, or Mike. So we did have a few questions that were sent in beforehand. So first off, for Naomi, so how accurate is visual body condition scoring from a distance compared to hands-on? And both Naomi and Karin, I will get you to turn on your webcam as well as your mic.
Okay, so the question was how accurate is body condition scoring from a distance versus hands-on? And so my answer to that would be not very. And it depends a lot on the time of year. Of course, when in the wintertime when cattle have a winter hair coat on, there's a lot of extra bulk there and sort of hiding ability, if you will. And so it's like a sheep. If you don't get your hands on them, you really can't tell how good they actually are in terms of body conditions. So I would say, you know, unless you have at least body condition scored your cows once within that season and actually got your hands on them and get a relation in your mind between the feel of that cow and how she looks, your visual assessment may not be that accurate.
Great. Thank you very much, Naomi. So next, a question we'll go for Karin for this one. So when looking at American sources, when they're using the 10-point scale, can you convert between the Canadian and American by just multiplying Canadian scores by 2, basically.
Basically, yes. So every half score on the Canadian system is 1 score on the American system. And actually, if you do head to bodyconditionscoring.ca ever, there is a conversion table right there. And I think Alberta Ag has one as well. And I would imagine we could find that information on a Saskatchewan website somewhere too. But yeah, that's how you do it.
All right, thank you. So our next question is for Mike, if he's close by there, Naomi. So the question is, do you make any special nutrient additions to your breeding bull ration based on body condition scoring?
Well, we would add, our program right now is based, we have a corn silage base to the ration, and we would add ground hay and protein supplements and then a mineral package to the bull ration.
All right, thank you. So for Karin, what body condition score would you like to see on replacement heifers during winter? In winter,
I would like to see our heifers be at a 3 year-round if I could keep them there.
All right.
Just because they are still growing, that extra bit of cushion between the 2.5 and the 3 really seems to work.
Okay. So another question for you here, Karin. So what is your opinion on using supplements such as lick tubs to provide extra cost or extra energy or protein? Is that something people should?
I'm not a nutritionist. I'm just going to put that out there. The supplement, the lick tubs can work. The cows will go to them and use them. I would prefer to go consult with your vet or your nutritionist to see if that's an option for your operation. I do know they work in certain situations.
All right. So another question for Mike. So do you have just one person on your operation who is doing body condition scoring, or are there multiple people doing it?
Well, there's 2 people on the operation, and we both do body condition scoring. Joanne and I will both do it, or independently do it. But quite often when we're doing it, there's also because we're handling cattle, a vet or someone else helping us. So it's very common to use that person as a reference also, just to double check what you're doing.
All right, thank you. So Karin, just a question about, you talked a lot about feed testing and balancing rations. So is there somewhere that people can find software to balance rations, and is this expensive to buy or hard for the average person to use?
This is probably the best ration balancing software that I'm aware of, and there may be others that I'm not, I'll freely admit that, is actually the Cowbite software. It was produced through a collaboration with Alberta Agriculture and people from Saskatchewan Agriculture as well, and I've used it. It's not overly expensive. I think it was about $50, but the price will be on the Alberta Ag website, and it's not really very difficult to use. All you need to really do is enter in the values from a feed test and kind of the other main important bits about your operation, like what condition score your cows are at now, do you want to put on condition, do you want to maintain, all those kind of factors, and go from there. But also the support staff at either Sask Ag or Alberta Ag would be happy to help walk you through it as well.
All right, thank you very much. So for Mike again, are you more concerned about young bulls being too thin or too fat?
Well, my concern about young bulls prior to breeding is, in most cases, if they're new bulls, like yearlings, they're over-conditioned. But once the season ends, the challenge is to get these bulls back into condition for the breeding season as a 2-year-old.
All right, thank you. So I have one more question here. So for Karin again. So if you mentioned that energy is usually what's limiting, what are some situations where protein might be the limiting factor?
When late in gestation, your protein requirements go up. So if you have, if you're on a forage where you have a decent energy, but for some reason through the growing season the protein requirements are lower, like maybe it's a straight grass hay that doesn't have the extra protein boost from alfalfa or a sandfoin or something like that, you may get something that's a little bit low in protein but has enough energy, and it will, in late in gestation, that's where you could run into a little bit of trouble.
All right. So my next question is for Naomi. So when you're talking about grazing cattle for most of the year and about maintaining body condition scoring, what role does genetics play in terms of maintaining body condition scoring?
I think genetics, as they say, there's more variation within a breed than there is between breeds. And so I feel that there are probably certain cows that are capable of maintaining condition and holding condition better than others, as there are differences in feed efficiency, things like that. I don't know of a gene that they have that they're selecting for that is one that helps to maintain body condition or holds body condition better than others, but there are definitely differences between cattle, and genetics plays a role there for sure.
All right, thank you. So that looks like it for questions for today. So if you do have any more, we encourage you to talk to your veterinarian or your regional extension specialist through your provincial ministry as you think more about body condition scoring. So we just have a few more things to say before we go here. So the first one is how to get more information and science-based production advice through the BCRC. So you can go to our website, beefresearch.ca, and you can click the subscribe button to sign up for our free email list. If you have Twitter, Facebook, or a YouTube account, you can connect with us there as well. And I would also encourage you to visit the Canadian Cattlemen's Association website, cattle.ca, where you can sign up for their free newsletter called Action News. So don't miss our next webinar. It will be coming up December 16th, and it will be talking about hormone use in beef cattle and some of the facts, fears, and fantasies that we hear out there. So it'll be a really interesting webinar to join in. So very shortly, as soon as the webinar ends, you're going to be asked to complete a short survey that asks about tonight's session and what you are most interested in for future webinar topics. So we do need your feedback to do the best job that we can to deliver information that's both useful and meaningful to you. And it helps us to make informed decisions and will help you to make informed decisions on what's best for your operation. So please complete that survey for us and don't hesitate to contact me with any questions or comments or suggestions that you have at any time. You're also going to receive an email from me within a couple of days with some links to watch the recording, as well as links to some additional information on body condition scoring. So as Karin mentioned, bodyconditionscoring.ca and some other resources as well. So that's it. So I'd like to thank all of you at home for joining us tonight. And on behalf of everyone, thank you, Naomi, Karin, and Mike, for volunteering your time and expertise. So good night.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.